Tonight, I'm delighted to be here with our Executive Vice President for Administration and Chief Information Officer, Melissa Woo. I had the pleasure of recruiting Melissa Woo to Stony Brook University when I was there, and I was so thrilled when she accepted an offer to come to Michigan State University as well. Her expertise in delivering great experiences across key stakeholders is something that is so valuable. We put student success at the forefront of our strategic plan, and she knows how to lead and develop teams that can execute against that goal. I'm so excited about her leadership. As you heard, she oversees many of MSU's internal-facing operations. She's now taking the helm and working across services like human resources, procurement, sustainability, facilities, and technology. All the while, she is maximizing the interconnected and strategic role of each area, helping them work seamlessly together. Her goal is to support the university's students, faculty, and staff. And we are excited for MSU and the MSU community to benefit from all the value that she adds. So Melissa, as I said, I'm so delighted you decided to join the executive team at MSU. Your background, of course, is very impressive, and the work you've done with EDUCAUSE is outstanding. I'm going to have you tell us a little more about that a little later. But my first question is about your role as the EVP for Administration and Chief Information Officer. Can you speak to your vision for realizing some of the goals you have for MSU?
Certainly, President Stanley. First of all, thank you so much for the warm welcome and for the kudos. And thank you to Nick as well for the warm welcome. I do want to start off by saying that when I looked at MSU and when you made me the offer to come join you here, I was really excited at just what I saw here, just the opportunity and the students and the faculty and the staff. And I heard a lot about how engaged the alumni are. And I mean, it's an incredibly engaged alumni that I've learned in my time here. So I think that's helped inform my focus here at MSU. What we did amongst the reporting units to the Executive Vice President for Administration was that we sat down and we developed mission, vision, and values between our executives. And really, they were framed around three principles. That is, outstanding service, great experience, and continual improvement to make sure that we bring value to the university. So those are the three parts of the vision that I think really are going to help us get toward our goals. And so to explain a little bit about the experience topic, to me, a lot of people talk about things like customer service, customer support. Those are incorporated in the concept of experience. To me, experience is how people feel before, during, and after they contact us, our services, and our products. So again, customer service, customer support are part of that, but it's truly how people feel. And so part of this vision is to make sure that we improve the student experience in how students feel when they come here to learn in the classroom, outside of the classroom, but also for our faculty and staff, and of course our alumni when they come to visit campus, when they come to games. The same for our local community. What is their experience when they come to MSU? So this is really about exercising empathy and understanding how to improve that experience. And that's really what our focus and our vision is within all of the EVPA reporting units.
So I think that's an amazing answer, and I think, again, points to this concept of really thinking about this in ways many administrators may not. So the idea of really focusing on what we call it the client, the customer, student, faculty, staff, experience is really key in making a difference there is amazing. So thank you for that attitude. And I think that does color all the work that you do and why I enjoy working with you so much. So amazingly enough, you came to MSU 3.5 months before the pandemic started, which was, amazing timing. I had a little longer to get acclimated to MSU, not too much more. What are some of the things you've learned, and what are the things that you hope we can take with us from this past 1.5 years and emerge stronger?
Oh, one thing I will point out is that we arrived here in a snowstorm. I will point this out because of the fact that I really had never wanted to come back to the Midwest, by the way. It's only because I really wanted to continue to work for you. I thought I'd point that out.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very appreciative.
So as you pointed out, I was here for a little bit before we flipped entirely to remote. And I was very fortunate in just the graciousness of the university leaders here that I met with almost every single university leader and a number of the major units before we flipped to remote. And it's also actually thanks to a great scheduler, by the way, on getting me in front of all these people in only 3.5 months. What I I learned a lot through that, but of course I'm still learning because I do believe in actively learning. I think we should be a learning organization. Something that I feel very passionate about is that people talk about, a new normal or the next normal after the pandemic. I prefer to refer to the better normal, if only because if we don't have something better after we emerge from the pandemic, we will have learned nothing. And this is a higher ed organization. I also believe that we're a learning organization, so we better have learned. So some of the things that I'm thinking about that we are learning is that there are new ways of working. We've got to be more flexible with our workforce. We found that there are some roles, there are some teams that are actually working extremely effectively, and in some cases, maybe even more effectively when they're not entirely on premise. That said, one of our guiding principles, again, student experience. I'm very, very concerned about the student experience. And it's very clear, and our students have made it very clear, that they want an on-campus experience. So we have to balance this flexibility with our workforce with making sure that we provide a great on-premise experience for our students and, of course, our faculty and the rest of our staff. However, this has let us think about some real options in workforce flexibility, which could give us options with physical space on campus. We might be able to rearrange how we use physical space so that it's more aligned to the mission of the university. So I think it's really exciting. Again, I'm really looking towards a better normal that is better for our students, better for our faculty, better for our staff, and of course our alumni and the surrounding community.
So we've had so many challenges during the pandemic, and I can't think of the number of meetings you and I have had along with other senior leaders of the university to think about some of the challenges and opportunities the pandemic presented. Can you give a few specific examples of how these many units within the EVPA office were involved in some of our efforts related to the pandemic?
I am incredibly impressed and gratified at how much everyone stepped up to the plate in all of our reporting units. So Infrastructure Planning and Facilities, known as IPF, really stepped up to the plate on providing extra cleaning. They've changed out ventilation for many of the classrooms to make sure that we have better air circulation. I mean, people in IPF were here during the entire pandemic. We had people on premise the entire time. And then this is something we have to remember. We didn't all just leave campus. We had a lot of staff who were physically here. In IT, it's amazing how quickly the IT staff flipped to creating hybrid classrooms. Despite our supply chain problems, they managed to equip classrooms with hybrid technology. So our educators could either be on premise or work from home. As I recall, there were drop shipments of microphones and webcams for our educators at home. Just incredible, incredible effort there. I will also call out University Procurement and Logistics. As you all know, we currently have supply chain problems, and they were certainly very bad at the start of the pandemic. But University Procurement and Logistics managed to get a lot of personal protective equipment on site, so much so that, that university to the east of us, they actually asked for help in supply chain because they couldn't get the PPE. And of course, Human Resources did quite the job in managing just all of the confusion and trying to clarify for people, who are working remotely. So I think all of the units really, really worked hard, and I'm really just, like I said, proud and gratified that they just did a wonderful job.
They've done an amazing job, and I'm going to shout out, I hope we didn't plan to talk about this later, but I can't, help but step up and talk about some of the work the IT did in all these complex issues around our mandates, around tracking, around vaccination attestations. There's so many things that had to be handled by IT, our early detection program and the work that had to go into that. And so I think we were constantly turning to your units and saying, please help us. And I think you rose to the occasion. So one of the things that I value, and I know you do too, is collaboration. We have some outstanding leaders at MSU, but it's really important that we work together because this is an extraordinarily complex place, and we really all need to be pulling together. Tell me a little bit about the scope of the work you're doing and the partners you're working with to help, again, accomplish things at the university.
Well, all the reporting units, sustainability, infrastructure planning and facilities, HR, IT, and University Procurement and Logistics actually service the entire university. They're enterprise-wide services. So we work with a broad swath of the university. We're working with multiple colleges around student success initiatives. We're working with athletics to make sure that they have everything they need to achieve their goals. I mean, it's really hard to pin down any one area because these cross all areas of the university. And I'm really grateful for just how welcoming and collaborative our partners have been in all of the different units and colleges.
Well, that's great. So, you know, you mentioned at the beginning the experience, and one of the groups you mentioned was our community. And I think, you know, our alumni are obviously incredible, and that community are fantastic. Alumni are obviously very important to us. What are some of the ways that alumni, just turn that around, we're trying to help them, but what are the ways that alumni can help us reach the goals that we have as a university? And from where you sit, you know, if you're reaching out to this audience tonight, what might you suggest for them?
Well, certainly alumni are an important part of the community. For one thing, we need feedback about your experiences coming to campus. I mean, it's very important. As I always like to say, I can't fix something that I don't know about. So whether you have a good or a bad experience, I think we want to hear it so that we can improve, we can do better, improve your experience. The one area that we're really starting to expand into is real estate. And so this is something that I think we do want to engage some alumni, particularly those that are within the state of Michigan and local to this campus, just to get feedback on where you'd like to see us go. I mean, I think this is very important. It's also important for us to reach out to community members as well. So I think those are ways that alumni can reach out and can contribute. Again, I want to make sure we serve them as well, so I don't want to be asking all the time, but I think we can really leverage the great expertise that we have out amongst all of our alumni.
So that's a great point, and you and I have talked about this. We have 5,300 acres or so on this campus, and about another 21,000 acres that we manage, you know, all through the state of Michigan, and maybe some places outside of Michigan as well. So that's extraordinary, and I think managing that and working with it, I think involves both expertise and local community engagement too, in the areas where we have these properties, to figure out what the optimal way to use them for the good of the university and the good of the state. So I think that's important. And as we've talked about expanding this part of your portfolio, you've been very interested in this real estate issue, and actually have set up an advisory committee that consists of some experts from the university, but also bringing in outside people as well to help you deal with this. And I think it's great. And I think any opportunity we can where we can pull upon the expertise of our alumni as well as our faculty and staff. There's a lot of expertise on this campus and off it, I think is going to make a difference for us. The kind of challenges we face are so complicated, and often local expertise is really important in getting things done. So I share your interest in working more with alumni. And, you know, they obviously were very interested in their support of the university from a financial point of view, but their engagement, whether it's sponsoring internships or getting engaged in advising us on key issues like this, it makes a huge difference. And I think about some of our work in Grand Rapids. I had a chance to tour Grand Rapids yesterday, and it was extraordinary to see the kind of work we're doing. And a lot of that was real estate based. So a lot of that was based on taking some property that we had and actually doing public-private partnerships to build research centers, to help establish a medical school. It's been an amazing engagement, but a lot of it based on, you know, public-private partnerships and entrepreneurship. So some of our alumni were key in making this happen, and I think particularly of the late Peter Secchia, who really was responsible for helping us get a medical school sited in Grand Rapids through his leadership. So alumni make a huge difference from this point of view. So I want to turn to a different topic now. So diversity, equity, inclusion, as you know, is a priority for me personally and for the university at large. And I know it's very important to you as well. It's something we talked about a lot when we were at Stony Brook as well. So tell me how you've championed DEI efforts prior to joining MSU, and more about the work you're doing now and have done with EDUCAUSE.
I'm very, very passionate about making sure that we properly mentor and coach aspiring leaders, particularly from underrepresented groups. A lot of the work that I've done through EDUCAUSE, and a little bit modestly, the reason I believe that I received the DEI Leadership Award was in working to make sure that in IT, as you imagine, the pipeline is not entirely diverse, is to make sure that we encourage and nurture the pipeline of different types of people into IT leadership roles, and that can be expanded to all leadership roles as well. It's something I care a lot about. I think a lot of what I do, though, is simply being visible. I think we need role models and people just need to be able to see there's someone that looks like them in a leadership role, because I think it helps people understand that they could be there someday. So that's a lot of what I've done with EDUCAUSE. EDUCAUSE, for context, is a professional organization, and it's really the premier professional organization in higher ed in IT. And it's really intended to help advance higher ed by the intelligent use of technology. So some of what I've been doing here is, really notably, is starting to look at broadband access for unserved and underserved portions of Michigan. And this is a great partnership between the Quello Center here at MSU, and I have been working a lot with Professor Johannes Bauer, who is fantastic. And that's along with Merit Network, which is our current research and education network provider. And what the Quello Center does is it gets a real assessment of just what connectivity is like for households in Michigan, and has in many ways, I think, upended some of the so-called common knowledge of how well or not well, really, households are connected here. His research and the Quello Center's work shows that it's actually, the connectivity is a lot worse than the federal stats say they are. So that helps the networking areas focus on trying to bring broadband networking to these areas. That means that we can increase access to education, access to medicine through telehealth. I mean, there are so many benefits that come along with increased broadband network access. This is something that matters a lot to me, because it is one of many types of access that we need to address here. I also have a lot of passion for making sure that we have access for the disabled. So there are a number of things we did during the pandemic to make sure that courses that online were captioned to the best of our ability. And what was great as sort of what I would call a side benefit of that particular effort was employing students who had lost their jobs during the pandemic. So I sort of figured we had a double win. We were captioning more videos than we were before, and we were employing students who may have needed the money. I mean, these are just a couple of things I'm working on. I'm working very closely with Dr. Jabbar Bennett, our Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer, who is fabulous, and he has great ideas. And we've been working on some efforts lately around the LGBTQIA 2S+ community. And so I'm really, really hoping that we can make strides there, and I think we are. We had a working group recently to work on pronouns and other appropriate forms of address. And at this point, Dr. Bennett and I are talking about how we put this into actual implementation to make sure that we are addressing people appropriately with the pronouns and the names that they use. So I'm really excited. I think there's a lot of things that we can do here in making strides on the DEI strategic plan, and I'm hoping to play my part in it.
That's great. And I think one of the things that I was so impressed by before you came to Stony Brook, at Stony Brook and at MSU as well, was your interest in being engaged outside of the university. I think that's so important for Michigan State, that our senior leadership, our distinguished faculty are engaged within organizations outside the university, so people see and hear and understand what great individuals we have at Michigan State. It really speaks very well to the quality of our institution when we see our folks out. So whether Melissa is attending, giving keynote addresses, involved in panel discussions, writing op-eds, I really encourage my senior leaders to do that, because I think it really helps get them out, but Michigan State out as well. And I think that's the kind of thing I pay attention to as a president. I notice people, I see people who may be talented, and I think about them as somebody I might want to recruit to my organization. So I think it's great to be doing that. And I think, again, that opportunity to be a role model for individuals is so important. There aren't a lot of people, Melissa, who fit your characteristics in CIOs around the country. So I think it makes a huge difference for people when they see it. And I think your pathway, beginning with a doctorate in biophysics and going on from there, is an interesting pathway that one could follow as well for people. Many students coming out of graduate school aren't sure what they want to do, and you really parlayed your expertise and your skills into a very different kind of outcome in terms of that, but one that's been incredibly impactful. So that's really the good news of it. So let me just drill down just very quickly. How do you actually bringing DEI home to your operations? What are some of the things you're doing to have an impact? We talked about the strategic plan for DEI. I know those are pillars that you're interested in, but tell me a little bit about how you're doing that.
Well, we've carved out a position to lead DEI efforts within the EVPA portfolio, and we will be also supplementing that position with staff that will help that person, because we have a couple of really large units. Both IPF and IT are very large units. So I'm hoping to really start to make a difference at the EVPA level, and also start to really address some of the DEI challenges and opportunities around staff, because I think staff are often not always considered when we talk about different initiatives. I want to make sure that our DEI professional does focus on staff. And of course, we want to support the students and faculty as well. So that's one thing that I'm working on right now. It's a little secret. We're still teeing that one up, but hopefully we'll make an announcement soon about the head of our DEI efforts there. I really also want to make sure that we have an opportunity to build up MSU excellence. I mean, we do a lot of things in DEI in this campus, and I think we're starting to see it all because it's come to light with the DEI strategic plan. We had a steering committee. Let's really highlight the great things that we're doing here, and I really want to start to focus on that as well, is what are we already doing and what can we do better? How can we augment? So I mean, those are things that I'm working on. Again, I think some of what I'd like to focus on is simply being visible. I mean, this is maybe a cute little anecdote, but I was at a function and a young woman ran up to me, and I didn't recognize her first. We were all wearing masks, and I realized who it was. That she's a student that is a leader in the local APITA student group, and that's the Asian Pacific Islander Desi American group. And this is the first time I'd seen her in person, and she just sort of like, oh, I'm so glad to see you. I'm also glad to see that you're as short as I am. But she said, it was actually kind of funny. And, she said, that makes me feel even better about how much you've achieved, and you're something I can look up to because you're an Asian woman. It was going on and on and on. But I mean, that's the intangible part of just being visible and representing, I think, in an area where you don't see many people that are either, of my particular ethnicity or a woman. Quite frankly, getting to your point, President Stanley, I mean, certainly in IT, and I would argue for most of the areas that I oversee, it's not very common to see women, particularly not women of color, in these leadership positions. So I think in many ways that is my role, is to simply be very public. That's why I give so many talks. That's why I do occasionally write an article. I think it's just to be an example to young people out there who maybe can't imagine themselves in a leadership position. Well, I'm here. You can be here too. That's the message I want to send.
It's a great message, and really proud of that. And I think, and just to amplify on that, I do hear that from students all the time. And when they talk about how they want to see more faculty and staff, essentially, who look like them, that's a fundamental concern from some of our student groups, is how we accomplish that. And so I think that remains, an important goal for the university, and one of the ones in our DEI plan that's so important. So I want to return to the concept of, the stakeholder experience and how important it is for you to make things run more smoothly, essentially, at the university. Can you give some kind of concrete examples of things you're tackling in that realm?
Well, anything that I think we really can do to be impactful in terms of the improving experience requires, as you were pointing out, collaboration across a lot of partners at the university. So anything that I'm about to mention requires collaboration across a number of areas. But I look at experiences, let's say it's a new student coming onto campus, or a new employee, faculty member coming onto the campus. Think about how many physical places, when we're on premise, how many physical places we ask people to go to onboard on this campus. We might ask them to go get their ID card over here, and we ask them to get their parking pass over here. That's not a great experience unless what we're trying to give people in terms of experience is just getting lost on campus, quite honestly. So I would love to partner with other areas on campus to rethink that flow. I mean, what we're asking people to do is, in many cases, they have to be their own project managers. And that's not a great experience. We should be providing them a great onboarding experience. And of course, once our students and faculty and staff are here, we should be providing a great experience so people want to stay, so they're passionate about MSU, so they really, really want to dig in because they're having a great experience here. So, I mean, that's a couple of examples of things that I think are really tangible that require collaboration. I think within the EVPA reporting units alone, there's something that happens on every campus, so it's not just MSU, but just something as simple, you would think, as moving between offices. Again, we ask people, or we ask their proxies, to be project managers. Is there any reason that we couldn't have a process where I need to move from one office to another, then automatically IPF knows whether or not they need to do a job there, IT knows whether or not to put the networking there, and telecom, HR automatically knows, when to update an entry in their records. I mean, all this should be seamless, and it shouldn't require someone to have to keep track of their own move. So, I mean, that's just a little example, but these are just the little things, what I call the little irritations, I mean, that we really can take away to make the experience more frictionless. Maybe that's the word I want to use. It's just like, make it more frictionless, because we have enough stressors in our lives without adding all these little things that are just irritating. So I think that's what I'm thinking of. But again, it'll take a lot of collaboration with partners across the university to get there.
I think this, again, dovetails very well with the strategic plan, and I'm going to ask you about that in just one second. But this notion of really doing things to make this a better place to be overall, and to really help people reach their full potential and help relieve them of some of those irritating things that get in the way and make life less enjoyable. And I think all of us get trapped by those sometimes. So I think finding ways to make those things more easily, I think, is great. And of course, that's one of your goals, obviously, with IT, I think, is to help do that as well, because that's one area that can be frustrating for people sometimes. So that's a particularly important one. So, but I do want to talk about the strategic plan, and that's something that, you and I have spoken a lot about, and again, the senior leadership was involved in. But of course, it was really an incredibly inclusive plan. So one that involved input from people all over the university, and again, one that I think puts people first. What are some of the items that you're particularly excited about and focused on when it comes to implementing the plan and reaching some of our ambitious goals?
All of them, but I'll focus.
Yeah.
Well, I am co-sponsoring 2 of the themes of the 6. One of them I'm co-sponsoring with Provost Woodruff and Executive Vice President Beauchamp, and that's around staff and faculty success. And that does tie into this idea of experience. You can't be successful unless you're having a good experience. And so I think that wraps into making sure that we do have success amongst our faculty and staff. So it's something I really want to focus on. I know that Provost Woodruff is very enthusiastic about honorifics and recognition, and I similarly think that we can do so on the non-academic staff side of the house. It's probably a little bit different, but at the same time, getting to your point, President Stanley, we want people to make names for themselves. We want them to be recognized, because I think that helps them feel better, their experience is better if they're recognized for what they do. So that's something I really care about. And wrapped into staff and faculty success, of course, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm going to incorporate that as well, is because if we're not inclusive, then your experience is bad and you can't be successful. So I think the point here is that DEI is foundational to the entire strategic plan. Another one of the themes that I'm co-sponsoring is with CFO Frace, and that is stewardship and sustainability. And there are so many different areas of stewardship and sustainability, it's actually hard to talk about them all. Certainly sustainability is one of the units that reports through me, and Amy Butler, who is the Director of Sustainability, is fabulous, and because she doesn't just look at things from the administrative side, she's actively engaging with the academic side, with faculty, with the colleges, to highlight the great things that they're all doing in sustainability. And it's not just necessarily environmental sustainability, it's sustainability of all kinds. When we think about the university itself, how do we sustain as a university going forward to make sure that we continue to perpetuate this great institution? That's part of sustainability as well. So those are all things we're thinking about. What both CFO Frace and I have been talking about, of course, is stewardship. And that's something that I focus on a lot. Although we do definitely want to deliver outstanding service, I mentioned continual improvement. We need to make sure that we continually improve and look at how well we steward the resources of the university. We do want to bring value. At the same time, we also want to make sure that we are good stewards of the resources that we use in order to support the university. So there's a lot of really exciting things in both those areas, but I mean, I'm obviously really, really excited about student success as well, and we'll do whatever we can to help support the academic affairs on student success as well as student affairs.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Do I get to ask you a question now?
Yes, I think that's allowed. I think it seems only fair since I think I've had 8 or 9 for you, but yes, seems fair.
Yeah, you know it's bad on Have an Evil Chuckle right now. Actually, It's going to be fun. So, we've now worked at 2 institutions together, and I think it's extremely fair to say that I would not be here if it weren't for you. So, again, thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So, I'm curious, what are the most pressing issues that you're really excited about working together on at MSU?
So first of all, just, I don't know if we said it at the beginning, but I brought you to come as the Chief Information Officer, but very soon after that, I promoted you essentially in charge of all of the administrative and infrastructure things we've talked about. So, and that was, I think, a testament to the respect I had for you as an administrator and leader and someone who could operate in multiple spheres and operate successfully. So that just everybody should know that I recruited you as a CIO, but then very rapidly we changed that to give you a much bigger area of responsibility. So I think, first of all, the whole issues around student success, particularly gaps in graduation rates. So you and I worked together on this before. One of the things I think we need to be able to do at Michigan State University is abolish gaps in graduation rates between groups. And so, for example, between Pell eligible and non-Pell eligible. Right now we have a significant gap in graduation rates between those 2 groups. We need to narrow that and eventually abolish it. The same way for difference in graduation rates between blacks and whites, for example, between Hispanics and whites. We've been making some small progress in that area, but there's much work to be done. And so it's a key part of the strategic plan to abolish those gaps. And I think it's achievable. I think we really were able to do it to a large degree at Stony Brook University while we were both there. And I think we can do it here as well, but it takes effort. The second thing I think is something you alluded to already and something that you're a leader on. And that, again, is really looking at success not only of our faculty, not only of our students, rather, but of our faculty and staff as well. I think that's so incredibly important. I think it really does make a huge difference. I think if people feel they have a pathway to success, they have a pathway to grow in their positions, to take on new challenges in the same way you took on a new challenge of being EVPA, I want to see other people at the university have the opportunity to get challenged and do more in the future. So I think that's something I care very deeply about. And finally, as you know, I'm really passionate about research and the impact we can have on not only our region, not only our state, but the world by the research that takes place. And I was thinking today about our work that, led to the development of cisplatinum that's saved so many lives around the world. Key discoveries we've made in other areas that have really changed, again, how people live. And so how do we continue to grow that? It's such an important part of what we do. How do we make it easier for people to submit grants? And how do we provide an IT infrastructure that's going to allow us to be more successful there? Because that, to me, is part of the key. Really having an infrastructure in IT that allows us to pursue some of the complex things we want to do. We have the facility for our isotope beams. That's going to be a very data-intensive thing. We have some major health initiatives we're working on in Flint and other areas. These are major data things. So how do we get efficient in doing this and do these in ways that are effective? So those are things you and I have talked about before, but I'm excited about partnering with you on them. And I think, together, I think we can make a difference, along with the other people who I haven't mentioned, of course, and the provost and their EVP Norm Beauchamp for the health sciences, Provost Woodruff. They're all key partners in this work. But I think there's much to be done, but I think there's some things I'm particularly excited about tackling. And I'm glad they came out in the strategic plan, and I'm glad we'll have a chance to work on them. So that get pretty close to what you needed. So okay, so we're going to take some questions now that people had from the audience. So as part of the DEI initiatives, we're being asked, what steps are being taken to diversify the vendor base at Michigan State University?
We've put together a committee that incorporates Dr. Bennett, as I mentioned before, the Chief Diversity Officer, and Infrastructure Planning Facilities, IPF, and of course University Procurement and Logistics. And what the committee is starting on are the items within IPF, because IPF has the largest spend across the university, and that's where we can make the most impact in terms of diversifying the vendors that they use. So it's pretty much just starting right now, but it's something that is considered to be extremely important. And once we address this with IPF, we will start to address this across procurement across the university.
That's great. So do you have another question for me?
Actually, I do. So getting back to the fact that we've worked together for several years, what surprised you the most about MSU?
So there's so many things. I think one is something you mentioned already, and that's the extraordinary commitment people have to the institution. It's really pretty unique, and that's our faculty, staff, and students, and of course the alumni as well. There's really a sense of belonging, a sense of family, but a sense of pride in being a Spartan. And that, I think, is very powerful. I'm not sure I've seen that any other institution I've been at to this degree, where people really care about being a Spartan. It really matters to them. And there's a very strong identity about what it means to be a Spartan, and the way you approach life, a kind of can-do attitude, but with a sense of humility as well. Very, very unique and very, very powerful. And I think, I don't think I'd realized how powerful that was, but as I've had a chance to travel now, I've had a chance to meet students, faculty, and staff, more and more of them, I see that coming through all the time. And it's one of the reasons, I think, again, why we can accomplish so much. You know, during the pandemic, we saw it. People pulled together. They were resilient. Students faced with challenges of going remotely accepted it, worked through it, benefited in some cases from it, actually used it to take more credit hours, for example, going forward, and to really, we shortened time of degree for some of the students through this. So that was amazing that they were able to adjust in this way. I look at faculty, some of whom had never taught remotely before, and the effort they put in to do it and do it well. We had thousands of faculty sign up over the summer, before this past fall semester, to take courses on how to better teach remotely. And so that, again, made a difference when we had to go to remote learning. They were better prepared than they had been in the past. And then I think, again, as we talked about kind of the way the campus has risen together to reduce the incidence of COVID on campus, and the way we've come together to accept getting vaccinated. People have been wearing masks religiously on campus. You and I are in separate rooms tonight, so that's why you see us without masks, because we're separate. We have an indoor mask mandate right now. So all of that, I think, is an example of kind of the unique perspective and attitude, I think, that Spartans have. So it's been really proud to be a part of that. The second thing is just, again, while I could read about the scope and scale of Michigan State, until you walk around the campus, which, by the way, is a really long walk. If you go Harrison to Hagedorn, it's a really long walk. Unless you've done that, you don't really have a feel, I think, for how impressive this campus is. And of course, I have not covered all 5,300 acres yet, but I'm working on it. But it's an amazing site. The campus is beautiful, and I don't think I fully appreciated that, its size and scale and beauty, until I got here. This is probably one of the most amazing collections of trees that I've ever seen. The diversity in the plant life here is amazing. So many things that I think are excited, but those are just a few that come to mind. So I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to answer it myself, but I'll let you start first. And that's, how do you see things evolving in the higher education landscape after COVID-19? What do you think are the things that are going to change?
Well, in many ways, I think, I've mentioned before that we're going to have to look at the workforce differently. I think people have realized in many cases that you can balance your home life and your work life, and that there is value in both. I mean, we have many members of our teams that either want to come back to campus to work or want to be working at home. It's actually not one or the other. So I think that's going to change higher ed itself, because of the fact that we have to rethink our workforce. Yet at the same time, we do need to focus on that student experience and how many students want to be on premise, because we need to make sure that enough of us, that we have the services on premise to serve the students so they get that experience. I mean, no student wants to come to basically a ghost town. So, I mean, that's part of, I think, how we're going to have to change the higher ed landscape. From an IT point of view, I think we're learning more and more about just how effectively one can leverage technology in order to provide better pedagogy. I think that the pandemic has forced an issue in online learning. Hybrid might be better. I'd leave that to those who are experts in pedagogy, but I think IT gives so many more avenues to explore for true engagement online that we hadn't even started to look at yet. There are so many opportunities in terms of personalizing education for students, making sure that something can basically look at how a student is progressing and where they might need more help, and use a little bit of machine learning, maybe AI, to help customize different ways of learning for a student based on how they learn. So these are so many things that we could be looking at that will really, I think, change higher ed going forward.
Yeah, I think you've summarized some of the things I would say as well. I think this whole issue around work and how it's going to change is incredibly important. I think it's still evolving as we speak. And I think we're seeing, in some sense, people who are deciding to leave work, other people who are deciding to do work in a very different way. And I think it's going to change not only our education dimension, but I think other businesses as well in very profound ways. And I think it's still shaking out at this point in time. But I think one thing that's true is I think you're going to find more and more that people are going to be clear about what they want and how they want to work. And I think it's going to be up to employers to decide, how they're going to make that possible, because I think there's going to be a continued search for talent, particularly in our business in higher education, our mission in higher education. There's a continuous search for talent. And I think we're going to have to be very flexible in how we approach these issues, because I think people are going to have options to go in very different directions. And I think we'll have to be flexible there. And then I think you're absolutely right. I think really the ability, we talk a lot about precision medicine. So in my old field, as being a physician, talk a lot about precision medicine. I think precision education is going to be, kind of the next thing. And I think you've talked about it already, using things like AI and machine learning to help students progress in remote learning or in asynchronous courses, developing better ways to advise students. I think a lot of work that's going on already, but it's much more accurate and detailed to provide them with information that don't take this particular sequence of courses, change it to this particular sequence of courses, because we can do a prediction of, 80% probability that you're more likely to pass if you do it in this sequence than do it in this sequence. That kind of detailed stuff, I think, is available, and I think the technology is there to do it. And I think it's a question of the will to implement and and I think the willingness to commit the resources to get it done. So I think these are all things that I think are going to be important in the future. So it's an exciting time in some sense. I think there's incredible opportunities, but also disruptive in some ways, and I think changes how we think about things. So it's important that we remain rooted in what our values are and our goals are, yet at the same time respond to this technology in appropriate ways. So I think there's a question now that came from me, from our audience, and that's, how will Michigan State University continue to support existing international relationships? If so, how do these historic relationships fit into the new strategic plan? So I think this has been, the international efforts of Michigan State University are something that I think all MSU alums and students and faculty and staff can be very proud of. And MSU has really been a leader in this area, both in terms of study abroad. It's something that our students have participated in at very high levels, I think with great results. We know experiential learning increases graduation rates and helps people succeed. At the same time, we've had some very deep relationships with other universities, particularly in Africa. And I look at our work with a number of African universities, the programs we've developed. We just received a very large grant for a proposal for a partnership in Kenya, for example, which is helping students succeed in Kenyan schools. This kind of opportunities to collaborate with colleges in Africa, colleges and universities in Africa, started decades ago, sponsored by USAID, primarily in agricultural work. Actually, the establishment of land-grant-like universities in Africa was part of MSU's mission. But I think that's continued, and we now have an African Alliance network that we've set up. And during the pandemic, of course, the travel has been greatly curtailed, so that has put a crimp in some of our business because of that. But at the same time, we've taken advantage of Zoom and other methods to continue to exchange ideas and to do seminars and have meetings and so on. So I've had a number of chances to meet with some of my colleagues in African universities remotely. The pandemic is a shared experience for all of us, and we talk about that and its impact. So we're continuing these alliances, and we look forward to continuing these alliances, and we look forward to getting back in person. But right now, at this moment in time, a lot of this work is being done remotely. But that, again, is part of our changes, the recognition that, through things like Zoom, we can hold these kind of meetings remotely, and some of them can be actually quite effective. So I think, again, so international remains a critical component for us. The pandemic has really curtailed travel for our students, faculty, and staff, and that's made a huge difference. But I think we're starting to get back to a better status on that. And as we do, I hope we'll continue to attract outstanding international students to Michigan State University and continue to have opportunities for our outstanding students to study abroad and learn about other cultures and other countries. So I think it's going to be a key part. It's been a key part of our DNA. I don't see that changing, but I do see some challenges in maintaining, particularly with certain countries, our ability to continue to attract students. And we just have to see how that works out. That may be decided at levels that are above mine at Michigan State University, what kind of relationships we can have with certain universities in certain countries. So I think I'm getting the message that it's time to wrap up. Melissa, I want to thank you for joining this evening. We're so fortunate to have you at Michigan State University. I want to thank all of us who joined us for this conversation. To you, your interest in learning more about MSU's plans for the future is something I found extraordinary among our alumni and donors. And we're really successful because of Spartans like you who remain informed and engaged. While we concluded the Empower Extraordinary campaign before my arrival, I'm pleased to tell you that MSU is stronger because of it. And I'm very grateful to those of you who supported the campaign priorities and invested in our future. And I'm particularly thankful to the Spartans who stepped forward after the campaign to help students who face financial challenges because of COVID-19. To see this level of support for our students during such a pivotal time was truly inspiring. Now we're going to undertake another capital campaign in the years ahead, and we will be looking for a community of loyal Spartans like all of you here for advice and guidance. As always, thank you for being committed to the Spartan community. Our efforts to create success for our students and community couldn't happen without your support. And finally, go green!